have Scott Bauer, the CEO of Prosper Trading Academy, standing by for a look at the U.S. dollar and the foreign currencies. Scott, thanks for helping us get the day started right here on the TD Ameritrade Network.
Of course.
Good morning to you. We've got the Fed two-day policy meeting beginning today. The announcement scheduled for release tomorrow at 1 p.m. Central Time. The presser, the Q&A session, will follow at 1:30 p.m. Central Time. Any chance for a surprise here?
No. Quick answer, no. It's going to be a state of course, monitoring the economic news that comes out, following the dot plot. Ben, I still think, and you and I have talked about this, that when all is said and done and we get to probably third quarter this year, that the risk is going to completely abate to any sort of rate decrease, and we are going to start to see some pressure to the upside. Numbers have been really good. Yeah, the last couple numbers that came out end of last week, a little bit more muted than we've seen. But you know what? The economy is moving along just fine here, and I certainly think the risk is to the upside in terms of rates, not a cut.
Understood, Scott, and many would agree with you in terms of that, certainly after that GDP number that we saw last week at 3.2%, that feeds into that discussion. Now, should the focus be on the question and answer session there? I mean, assuming that we don't get any surprises, and if so, what should we be listening for specifically?
I think you have to listen for global growth. We've seen some a mixed bag out of China over the last few weeks. Just 2-3 weeks ago, we started to see some real positive numbers come out. Nothing gangbuster, but really some acceleration, and then just overnight we saw, a decrease again. So I think that's going to be key. We got some Eurozone numbers that came out just now that were actually better than expected. So I think that's going to be key here. Really, we're doing fine just here. Nothing out of the ordinary, but we're doing fine just here. And I think it's all going to be focused on what is the rest of the world doing and how much they have to go to catch up to us, which obviously impacts the dollar.
Yeah, Scott, I mentioned the GDP last week, and just kind of echoing that sentiment. I mean, even yesterday's economic data, the spending remained very firm. Inflation, I think you touched on, remained somewhat muted. Talk to us about that. Really just speaks to the strength that we're seeing here in the U.S., and again, somewhat isolated from what we've been seeing in terms of Europe, in terms of China. I mean, we were talking this morning about another wave of weak manufacturing data out of China last night. The Caxton missed, and some of the PMIs missed as well.
Right, which coming off the heels of some of the other reports that they've had over the last week or so, which were actually pretty positive, that was a surprise to me. And, what it really boils down to right now, and I think this is the key for the Fed, is, the U.S. is the only game in town right now. It's the only game in town economically. It's the only game in town from currency standpoint, which is why the dollar has maintained its strength, even though it's off its highs over the last 24 hours or so. So I think that's going to be the key, is the focus on what is the rest of the world doing, and then how does that impact what's going on here.
Yeah, I agree, Scott. You mentioned the dollar. We saw it into a new high for the year last week, but short-lived. I mean, limited up and through that 98 handle. It's pulling back a little bit this morning.
Yeah, could be some profit taking. Also, I think the reports that you're seeing out of the Eurozone, probably were a bit of a surprise here. So exactly, helping lift that there. But, there's still so many tailwinds here, Ben, for the dollar here. Again, it's really, when you quite think about it, it's the only game in town. It's the only currency that people are really, flooding to. So that's going to support it. Are we going to get back to those record, those highs again, above 98? Probably. I don't know that we're going to get there today, tomorrow, the next day, but there's definitely a lot of tailwinds here.
Yeah, certainly. We have a chart of the daily time frame up there. We can see how that has been supported, and every pullback that we've seen for the most part this year has been a buying opportunity. Let's talk, Scott, a little bit about the British pound. I'm hearing of not only issues that Theresa May is dealing with in her own party, but also some issues Jeremy Corbyn's been dealing with amongst participants of the Labour Party, and basically the waiting game that we're dealing with. And I'd imagine that this shifts the focus on over to the technicals again to explain some of the selling that we've been seeing here.
Big time. It's so tired. It's a tired trade. Right? There's only so many times you can go back to the well here and say, all right, we're going to extend this. We're going to extend this. Things aren't so great before people just start saying, all right, you know what? We're going to get out of this space and just look elsewhere. And I think that's what you're seeing right now with the pound.
Yeah, the pound failed a few times at that 134 level. It'll be key to see if they continue to exhibit some of the weakness here. Now, last month we saw the British pound trade into new lows for the month of April. I'm sorry, last week, new lows for the month of April, and it took out the March low. I'd imagine that also helped the bid that we saw in the dollar last week a bit.
Oh, no doubt about it. And that's one of the other tailwinds behind the dollar is weak currencies, globally. And with the pressure on the pound right now, that certainly is propping up the dollar. And, we may see those lows again in the pound.
Yeah, good point, Scott. It's not just the euro currency. Now, last week, we also saw the yen. It wasn't just the pound. The yen narrowly missed posting a new low for the year. I think they missed it by something like 9 ticks. I thought, and we were kind of talking about it, how conditions seem to be getting a little bit better in Asia, but maybe, we always say one data point does not a trend make. Maybe we need to have a little more time before we get ahead of ourselves on this one.
Yeah, I was really caught by surprise at the news that came out overnight with the weak data coming out of Asia, because they had been signaling, maybe not a recovery, but at least a bottoming out
Firming
there.
Up.
So, maybe we go back. Yeah, exactly. Maybe we go back to the well here and say, all right, things are not necessarily bottoming out here, and we have to rethink things. But that's exactly why you saw that pressure on the yen.
Yeah, certainly. And Scott, we'll keep a close eye on some of these currencies. We've got a lot going on here today, and we appreciate you being part of that. Traders, that's Scott Bauer. He's the CEO of Prosper Trading Academy. Thank you, Scott.